coming to this event organized by the Center for Dialogues and Scholars at Risk of New York University. It seems that over the last few years, since the beginning of what is called the Arab Spring, between quotes, we have paid attention to issues that became part of the global conversation. If you recall, those of you who attended some of the events, already in November 16, 2011, we organized our first panel discussion on the question Arab Spring or Arab Winter. It seems that we were not far off, considering what is happening today, both in the main countries of the so-called Arab Spring, what happened in Egypt, what is happening in Tunisia. We continued with other panel discussions on intellectual freedom, on academic freedoms, and recently, in fact, our last event was on Tunisia, the last hope of the Arab Spring, question mark. So today we again come back to the issue of the Arab Spring in Tunisia in particular, but also admit, and we should, that contemporary societies, if you look back at the modern history, without free knowledge, both in the production of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge, there is no progress. This is a truth that is attested to by history, and it is universal. And here I would like to refer you to a very important book, The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, Why Some Are So Rich and Some So Poor, by David Landis. He demonstrated clearly through a global survey of history that without free knowledge, there is no progress in history. And so we have to admit then that this is applicable also to what is happening in that part of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, where precisely academic freedoms have been at risk over the last 3 years since the coming to power of Islamist parties. Both in Tunisia and Egypt, and particularly in Tunisia, and I will come back, there have been attempts, very grave attempts, serious ones, to precisely limit academic freedoms. And we have here among us a symbol of resistance to those attempts through the presence of Dean Kazdaghli, Dean of the School of Humanities and Arts of the University of Manouba. You may recall, you may have read in the press, from the New York Times to the Atlantic Monthly to others, the saga of the Manouba University and how the office of the dean and the university itself have been taken over at one point by Islamist extremists called Salafists, and how that saga has continued for more than 2 years. In fact, it's not resolved yet, where academic freedoms were attacked concretely, gravely, and where death threats were a daily presence. In fact, Professor Kazdaghli was professor of history and the dean of the School of Arts and Humanities, is now under police protection 24 hours a day because his life is under serious threat by Islamist extremists. In the times of dictatorships in the countries of the so-called Arab Spring, academic freedoms were under pressure by secular regimes. They were afraid of the challenge that freedom of expression, that freedom of thought, freedom of knowledge would present to their authoritarian rule. Today, that pressure has been replaced by the threats of Islamist regimes, the Islamist regimes that took over through elections. We should not come back to this point. We have explored it many times, how these elections were in fact a misunderstanding. The fact remains that universities of both Tunisia and Egypt, but particularly Tunisia, have been under threat by a new sort of political power, absolutist political power, authoritarian political power, in the name of religion. And the question, of course, is what is better, secular dictatorship or religious dictatorship? You choose between cholera and the plague. This is why today we again focus our attention on the experience of the so-called Arab Spring, and the occasion is to publicize the report of the conference that we organized in Tunis in February, last February, together with my colleagues of Scholars at Risk. We organized it precisely in Manouba, where we wanted to bring our support, moral support, through the presence of 15 presidents of universities from the region, from here, from Tunisia, of course, to express that support to the action of resistance of the university and of Professor Kazdaghli, and beyond the moral support to explore the notion of academic freedoms and what it represents precisely, as I said at the beginning, in the progress of nations, in the wealth and poverty of nations. And this is what we will do tonight. And I invite you to read the report. It is online. You can find it at on the website of the center, www.centerfordialogues.org. The full report is available in English. And I think the executive summary and the recommendation of the report were also distributed to you. And so let me then briefly introduce the panelists. On my right is Professor Kazdaghli. Professor Kazdaghli, in addition to being under threat and police protection 24 hours a day, is an eminent professor of history. His field of research is minorities, and particularly the Jewish minority in Tunisia, and his work as a historian is universally applauded and recognized. Tomorrow, in fact, we will have a working session with the Institute of Jewish History here at NYU, where Professor Kazdaghli will be honored and listened to on his research as a historian. So I'm very happy to have him here among us, and he will update us on the evolution of the situation in Tunisia, which is not very bright. But he will tell us how that evolution relates to our particular concern, academic freedoms. On the right of Professor Kazdaghli is an eminent French diplomat, Ambassador Serge Telle, who has a long career as one of the eminent diplomats of the French Foreign Service. he dealt with various issues ranging from the United Nations to the Middle East to the Mediterranean countries. In fact, today, because of his expertise in that field, he is the delegate of the French government to the action that the French government undertakes with regard to the Mediterranean region. The Mediterranean region is very important to the French government and to that part of the world. Nothing happens without going back to the Mediterranean. Maybe because we are from the area, we think that the Mediterranean is the source of all that happens in world civilization. I'm glad that Mustapha Tlili is among us here tonight. And finally, my colleague and neighbor on the floor and very dear friend, Prof. Quinn, who is the head of the intra-university network in this country and beyond, because he made it a universal network called Scholars at Risk. Professor Kazdaghli was under threat, that he should do something because he knows what it is to be under threat. So with this, I will give the floor to Professor Kazdaghli and ask him to please limit his remarks to 10 minutes. And this will be also my request to the other panelists so that we will have enough time to engage with you in a debate on these issues. Professor
أعتذر سأتكلم بالعربية.
I apologize, I'll have to speak in Arabic.
أنتمي لجيل نطق فيه اللغة الفرنسية واللغة العربية بنفس المستوى.
I belong to a generation that equally masters Arabic and French.
أفهم الإنجليزية لكن لا أتجرأ على الحديث بها أمامكم.
I do understand English, but I don't dare speak it in front of you.
أشكركم على الحضور.
I thank you for being here.
وأشكر مصطفى تليلي مؤسس مركز الحوار ومدير مركز الحوار.
I would like to thank you and thank Dr. Mustapha Tlili, co-founder of the Center for Dialogues at NYU.
وأشكر كوين المدير التنفيذي لشبكة جمعيون في قطر.
And I would also like Professor Quinn, who is the Executive Director of SAR Scholars at Risk.
لن أتحدث عن الأحداث التي عاشتها كليتي.
I shall not dwell on the events that my faculty live.
هي أصبحت مدونة في كتب وفي أفلام.
They're currently being recorded in films and in books.
منها هذا الكتاب يوميات منوبستان.
Including this book, Chronicles of Manouba.
وممكن إذا كان وجدنا من الوقت هناك شريط صغير سنعرضه فيما بعد.
If time allows, we have a video that we can show you in a little bit.
فقط سأتحدث عن هذا الموعد الرابع الذي يجمعني بزملائي في مركز الحوار وفي جمعيون في قطر.
So therefore, I shall now concentrate on this fourth meeting for us here with our colleagues from Dialogue and from Scholars at Risk.
لأذكر أن هذا مظهر من مظاهر التعاون بين الجامعات.
I'd like here to say that this is one way or one phase of cooperation between among universities.
وهو تعاون يبين أن هناك قيم جامعية، قيم عالمية تجمع الجامعيين أينما كانوا.
This proves that there are universal university values that would probably unite us here among different academic institutions in the world.
وما يعني دعوتهم لنا في أبريل 2012 دعوتهم للحضور هنا في نيويورك.
The invitation they extended to us to attend a meeting here in New York in April 2012.
هو شعورهم بأن الجامعة أصبح مكانها مهدد في هذه البلدان لعرفة أشياء إيجابية.
Was an expression of their feeling that the university is now threatened in regions that have already seen and witnessed positive developments at some point.
فالتغيير الذي وقع في تونس في في 2011
The change that Tunisia saw in January 2011,
والذي انطلقت منه التغييرات في عدة بلدان في المنطقة العربية
that was the spark for other events and changes in Arab regions as well, in Arab countries in the Arab region.
اعتقدنا أنه سيكون فرصة لتطوير العمل الأكاديمي والجامعي.
Was an occasion, this is how we thought, was an occasion for developing academic and university work.
وفعلا تم اتخاذ عدة إجراءات إيجابية.
And in effect, many positive steps were taken,
خاصة إطلاق الطلبة الذين كانوا مسجونين.
particularly releasing the students who were detained
من جميع الاتجاهات.
from different walks of life.
وكذلك قوانين لجعل الأساس في التسيير الجامعي يقوم على الانتخابات.
As well as laws that have depended on elections for managing the affairs of universities.
وشخصيا انتخبت في جوان 2011.
I personally was elected in June 2011,
بعد أن منعت في مناسبتين من أكون حتى نائب عميد.
having been prevented on two previous occasions from even being a deputy dean.
ففي مناسبتين تم اقتراحي لأكون نائب العميد في 2002 و2005.
So twice in 2002 and 2005 I was nominated to be a deputy dean.
كنت منتخب الموافقة على هذا القرار.
I was elected actually for that post, however this election was never endorsed.
يعني كان يعني فعلا يعني الجو إيجابي جدا بعد بعد جانفي 2011.
So I can say that after January 2011 the atmosphere, the situation was very positive.
لكن التحول وقع بعد الانتخابات في أكتوبر 2011.
But the change really happened after the elections in 2011.
والتي تجسدت بروز في مستوى السلطة حزب إسلامي أو حزب ديني.
Something that was manifested in the presence of an Islamist political party that took power. Groups. Or identifying with these groups.
واتهمنا نحن بالمغالاة وبالتشدد.
And we were the party that was accused of being extremist or rigid.
نحن نعتبر أن الجامعة لها قوانينها لها ضوابطها لابد أن تحترم.
We believe that universities have their laws and their controls and that these laws and controls must be respected.
الجامعة تحترم الأديان كل الأديان.
The university respects all faiths.
والجامعة تحترم الأحزاب كل الأحزاب.
And respects all parties.
لكن نطلب من السياسيين ونطلب من الدينيين من رجال الدين أن يحترموا إذن قوانين الجامعة وضوابطها الأكاديمية والبيداغوجية.
However, we do require or we do request that politicians and that religious people do respect the controls, the guidelines that are the academic guidelines that are usually the prerogatives of academic institutions and universities.
تعرضنا للتهديد للتعنيف الجسدي لأننا دعونا للاحترام هذه القوانين والضوابط الجامعية.
We were subject to violence. We were subject to threats only because we asked that these rules and laws be respected.
ووجدنا تضامن من المجتمع المدني ومن الأحزاب الديمقراطية.
We found understanding by the civil society and by democratic institutions.
لكننا لم نجد تفهما ولا دعما من طرف المؤسسة أو وزارة التعليم العالي ومن الحكومة.
However, we did not find the understanding, let alone the support from the Ministry of Higher Education, from the government.
لذلك أصبحت الكلية يعني مجال لل يعني جلبت الاهتمام الرأي العام.
Therefore, the faculty drew and became a focus of public attention.
وتجاوز هذا التجاذب إلى حد أن أصبحت حتى يعني العلم الوطني وراية تونس يعني يطاح بها وتمزق فوق يعني سطوح الكلية.
It got to the point where the national flag, the Tunisian national flag, was damaged on the premises of the university.
كان ذلك يوم 7 مارس 2012.
This happened on the 7th of March 2012.
وهذا ما جلب الاهتمام بما يحدث في الكلية في المستوى الوطني وفي المستوى العالمي.
This probably made what's happening in the university a focus of attention locally and internationally.
لذلك كان الدعوة في أفريل 2012 في هذا الإطار، بعدما يعني لمدة أشهر كانت هناك صراع بين مفهومين للحريات الأكاديمية.
Hence the call in 2012 came at the heels of this conflict between what's going on in the academic freedoms and how to protect it in view of what the situation transpired.
لم تكن كليتنا وجامعاتنا وحدها عرضة لهذه الضغوطات.
Our faculty was not the only faculty that was subjected to these pressures.
فهناك جامعات يعني تم تهديد الأساتذة لمحتوى دروسهم لأنهم يدرسون تاريخ الفن.
Other universities, for example, were threatened. Some professors were threatened because they teach subject matters such as art history.
فقالوا لهم لماذا تدرسون ميكالانج؟
They were asked, why do you teach Michelangelo?
أو في بعض الجامعات الأخرى فرض على عدم الاختلاط بين البنات والبنين في المطاعم.
Co-education was a problem. Girls and female and male students were asked to be segregated in cafeterias.
فهذا يعني في هذا الإطار ما حدث في كليتي أصبح مجلبا للأنظار وخوف وتخوف من أن هذا الربيع في تونس يصبح يعني يتحول إلى شتاء أو زوبعة من مثل ما تشاهدون في البارحة.
It is in this vein that there were apprehensions that what was thought of as a spring in our part of the world, in our university, would turn into a dreary winter. And this is what you came to witness yesterday.
هذا التعاون مع مركز الحوار ومع شبكة جامعيين في قطر يعني كان هذا منبعه هو تضامني بين الجامعيين.
So the cooperation between us, dialogues and SAR, was this kind of a cooperative approach and reaction to the situation and to what happened in Tunisia.
ذلك بعد أن زرنا نيويورك في أفريل كانت هناك وفد قادم إلى تونس في شهر جوان.
We came to New York in April, followed by a visit by a delegation from New York to Tunisia in June.
والمرحلة الثالثة هو عقد هذا الملتقى في تونس في شهر أبريل.
And the third step was the convening of this conference in Tunisia in April.
واليوم أنا مسرور للحضور معكم للإعلان على صدور التوصيات أو ملخص لأعمال هذه الندوة التي وقعت في تونس ونتحدث اليوم عنها في نيويورك.
It is my pleasure to be present with you here today on the occasion of the release of the report of this conference so that we can discuss it here together in New York.
وسأكون مسرور لو أن نترجمها إلى الفرنسية ولا العربية للاطلاع عليها أيضا في تونس وفي أوروبا وفي فرنسا.
It will be my pleasure that the report be translated into Arabic and into French so that we would guarantee the widest dissemination to interested populations.
لكن رغم أنه لم يتم الاكتفاء بالضغط تواصلت المسلسل في المحاكمات.
However, despite the pressure, the situation continued as it was expected during the trials.
يعني تعرضت لمحاكمة دامت 10 أشهر.
I was subject of a lawsuit and trial that lasted for 10 months.
اتهمت بضرب بنت منقبة.
In which I was accused of beating, of slapping a woman who was wearing the niqab on the face.
في الحقيقة هي التي اقتحمت هي وزميلتها مكتبي وقامت بعثرة كل أثاث.
However, the fact of the matter is that she broke into my office and she threw my papers and on the floor and she disrupted she threw the furniture around.
دامت المحاكمة 10 أشهر.
The trial lasted 10 months.
تم فيها يعني القضاء أنصفني ويعني حكم بعدم سماع الدعوة.
I was acquitted of charges and the subject of the trial was deemed inadmissible.
وأقر الخطأ بالنسبة للبنات.
And the two defendants were found guilty.
لكن السلطة لم تكتفي لأن القضاء ليس مستقل.
However, because the judiciary is not independent, the powerful were not really satisfied.
وسأمثل في الأسبوع القادم مرة ثانية أمام دائرة استئناف.
The case was appealed, and I will appear in the appealed case next week.
وكما ذكر فأنا أيضا أعيش ووزير الداخلية في ندوة صحفية عقدت في 28 أغسطس الماضي.
On the 28th of last August, the Minister of the Interior,
يعني وزير الداخلية ذكرني ضمن 19 شخصية
mentioned
أكاديمية وسياسية مهددة بالقتل.
my name as one of 19 other people who are threatened for assassination or who are in a list for assassination.
لكن أنا رغم كل هذا أنا وزملائي نعتقد أن هذا الذي نقوم به هو دفاع عن الحريات الأكاديمية.
However, I and my colleagues believe that what we're doing now is an act in defense of academic and public freedoms.
ونحن مصرون على مواصلة هذا لأن تونس يعني كتونسيين نعتقد أن هذه الفترة ضروري أن تفضي إلى أو تنتهي هذه المرحلة الانتقالية إلى نظام ديمقراطي وحديث.
However, we're determined to stand the course because we believe that this era must be followed by a modern Tunisia in which we have a modern rule of law.
أشكركم وأنتظر أسئلتكم.
I would like to thank you for your attention, and I will wait for your questions.
I now give the floor to Ambassador Telle, who is going to talk to us about the legacy of the Enlightenment. No value system today in the modern world can be understood without going back to what the Enlightenment and the age of the Enlightenment achieved in constructing precisely a value system that we know today as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other declarations of human rights, but the Universal Declaration of Human Rights remains the bedrock of that value system. We owe it to Rousseau, we owe it to Montesquieu, we owe it to Voltaire, we owe it to John Locke and to Hobbes. We owe to the battles that were fought in the name of freedom throughout Europe, and then in America, and then other lands, that we today cherish these freedoms. And I am happy that here we have Ambassador Telle, who is going to enlighten us on
Kazdaghli and what he said of the situation of Tunisia and his own situation. But I'll try to develop this link, as Professor Tlili said, between progress, academic freedom, which is called What Are the Enlightenments? It's extremely important to read because it really lays the foundation between autonomos in Greek and heteronomos. But it's I think the reference book. But I am not a philosopher. I am a diplomat. So I will talk as a diplomat. I do not think progress. I see it happen. I observe it. I know it's a struggle. It's a struggle today as it was yesterday. And this is the reason I will start, or I will base my speech on considerations to be observed in the Arab world, but not only, considerations which are true for all regimes, considerations which are true everywhere for every human being, and which are the heritage of the Enlightenment. Few people today will deny the link between education and progress. No matter what the context is, no matter what goals we set ourselves, human beings, being what we are, imperfect by nature, need to be educated if they are to progress, to leave behind violence, and become of what they are and what they can achieve for themselves and for the others. This very simple idea was really well expressed, I think, by one of our great writers called Victor Hugo, who said, or summed up this idea saying, opening a school is closing a jail, is closing a prison. The problem becomes, of course, more striking if we ask ourselves what progress means and set out to define it more precisely. I am aware of these highly theoretical difficulties, and I shall not attempt to address them. This is where it's easier to be a diplomat than a philosopher. Progress, as I said, I've seen it, and we can all see it. Progress today in the Arab world, as anywhere else on this planet, it's first and foremost two intangible, universal objectives for the people. It's to be well, and it's to be free. To be well, it's a situation in which obtaining food is no longer a struggle. It's the rolling back of diseases. In a word, it's a much easier life, a much easier existence. It's becoming truly human rather than reduced to subsistence and survival. To be free, it's the ability for every individual to escape from determinism and ignorance that holds back. Again, it is being truly human, accepting being imperfect, but determined to making progress. Freedom gives you this possibility to make progress. So what can we do to promote these two essential goals? Well-being and liberty, along with what flows from them, freedom of speech, academic freedom, freedom of conscience, the right to an independent system of justice, in a word, democracy, perhaps. This question was at the bottom of the philosopher of the Enlightenment thinking, reasoning. They ask themselves this question, and this question remains for our society to a varying degree. In the Arab world today, it is clear, at least for me, that there will be no positive and sustainable progress in the political field without progress in the economic and social field as well. The two go together all the time. To understand how these goals can be pursued, we also need to get back to objective and tangible truth. Of course, truth is a difficult concept, and I'm sure you have had very good course about what is truth. But it's also, there are some scientific truth. And this is exactly the beginning of what the Enlightenment was. The philosophers at that time based their work on the work of Copernicus and Galileo, and they started to think the world on this scientific basis. And I still think that it's the most important way to learn. Education is about doubt, which makes you push the ideas, push your reasoning to arrive to certain certainties. And this is exactly this work. That's the beginning of this thinking gave, of course, your Declaration of Independence in 1776, 4th of July, and the Bill of Rights. And few years later, the French Revolution, and as Professor Tlili said, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted on the 26th August 1789. So why is it so? Because scientific facts will always defeat ideology. And that, ironically, that's relation between science and religion and the doubt about the way the two are together started with great Arab and Muslim philosophers and scientists in the 9th century. You all know them. Ibn Rushd, who is known as being Avicenne, Ibn Sina Avicenne, Ibn Rushd, Averroès, Razi, very spiritual scientist called Razi, and they were all in the Umayyad Empire. And the historian near me will explain you that, but there was a great sultan at that time called Al-Mamun, who decided to open house of knowledge. And these places were places where all the knowledge known at that time were discussed, that you could take all the risk possible with your mind to explore all the possibilities of mind and all possibilities of reflection. This is where the Arab philosopher rediscovered the great Greek philosopher. So ironically, that was the beginning of the 9th century. But unfortunately, it is far away now in the Arab world, and the house of knowledge are still to be reinvented, I think. So why is it? Why the Enlightenment ideas were so important is because they really understood that in order to progress in your knowledge, in order to advance in the way you think the world and yourself, you have to keep moral, religion, and political consideration out of universities. Universities which started at, in the 12th, 13th centuries had a great, the Enlightenments had a great impact on the way universities were finally developed and in the way the universities are today. University must be sanctuaries, shelters from all form of pressure. And this is what Professor Kazdaghli explained about the Manouba University, and I must pay tribute, and we all must pay tribute to the courage and determination he expressed to protect university from being blocked. Underlying this program, there is, of course, underlying this program about knowledge and freedom of university, there is, of course, a political project. This is a program for freedom against oppression, democracy against tyranny, enlightenment against obscurantism. But this is also the justification for some who seek to discredit the educational program I've described, and we think that it's a propaganda machine. It's exactly the contrary. But this political project that I'm referring to is the pursuit and the continued pursuit of the material and intellectual progress I was just referring to. Sorry for I had to written my speech, and therefore it's not always as clear as it should be. But what I meant, what I'm aiming to, is that the challenge today, and the people in the Arab world asking for well-being, dignity, freedom, are exactly in the path of the Enlightenment. What were discussed and set out at that time, it's still valid today, and it will still be valid wherever you are, whatever you do, whatever your social condition is, wherever you are born. This is the reason that the Arab world, people in the Arab world are demanding things that are in the continuity of the revolution which were made 200 years ago. But at the bottom of that, universities must be protected from political pressure. They must claim for them. They also must claim for themselves the status of political forum, places where universal political project, as I said, can be pursued. To conclude, I would say therefore that university progress, academic freedom, and universities are par excellence the places where progress in all directions, progress for people, progress for the society, can be formed. Universities must play just such a role as places protected from political pressures. They must not be afraid to claim their goal, the goal of liberty for minds and dignity for individuals. That is the only goal to be recognized for them, and there is none more nobler. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Telle. We now move to a more concrete approach, since we heard about the history of academic freedoms through both the present history, but going back to the Enlightenment, the background, the origins. And now my colleague Prof. Quinn is going to enlighten us about, he as an expert in this field, what do we call exactly academic freedoms, and what the Tunisia conference and the report that you have here before you achieved, and what are the recommendations, and what is the future of this project, and what is next to do, so that we can really come up with a system of protection that will be applicable also in the Arab world, and that system of protection is very much needed today. So, Rob, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank my colleague Mustapha Tlili for really giving us an opportunity to work together as an engagement point into the Arab Spring. Our program has always worked with scholars from the Middle East, but this particular moment in history, we really were grateful. We were looking for ways to do more, and it was a wonderful opportunity. I also want to thank Dean Kazdaghli for making the trip and being here, for being such a courageous defender of these values, and for Ambassador Telle also for being just a wonderful articulator of this important space that it is that we work in and the values. Since this is the formal release of the report, I would also like to thank the French government, the U.S. Department of State, and the Hans Seidel Foundation for their help in sponsoring the event that led to the conversations that led to the report, and of course the university for hosting the event. And I guess I should thank NYU also for hosting both of our programs and allowing us to do this work. Mustapha already summarized what Scholars at Risk is, so I won't go into that at any real length. There is a little brochure on the table if you want to take it and read about it, and our website is there. But as he said, we are an international network of universities. Our members are universities. So we have over 330 universities, and I think it's over 35 countries participating in this work. And they have come together first and foremost as an expression of solidarity, that we as the higher education sector itself have a responsibility to join together to defend this space. And I know it's very hard for us to really appreciate what that means when we sit in a space like this. How many of us at this moment have any nervousness at all that what might be said here tonight could cause you to be arrested, could cause you to be prosecuted, to have any fear that physical violence will come to you for being at this event? But that is what we are talking about in many places in the world, and that is the experience that Dean Kazdaghli lives with and that his colleagues experienced at his university. We're talking about physical intimidation. We're talking about violence simply for trying to have a conversation, simply for trying to publish, to research, to write, to teach. So this is such a basic concept that I really just wanted to pause and emphasize what we're talking about, because it is so easy to take for granted in the places where we have it. And this is why our network was born, to really use the space that we have in places where we are not threatened, to say we are one sector, we are one community, and we stand together. And so our engagement with Tunisia started, as Mustapha said, really with the issue of protection. Early on in our network, it was the current president was in prison at that time, and we wrote on his behalf to demand his release from being imprisoned. And more recently, when the pressures came on Manouba and the physical threats came to Dean Kazdaghli and others, and the prosecution against Dean Kazdaghli facing potential of years imprisonment, we wrote and we campaigned and we went to Tunisia and we objected to this. And this is the voice of the higher education trying to say, no, there shouldn't be these pressures on this space. And then, of course, in doing this also, we then transition into what we call prevention work, which is trying to reduce these pressures. And that's why we said we needed to be in Tunisia. We needed to show those who are pressuring the university that they wouldn't be able to do this without the world seeing it. That the higher education sector would be paying attention, hoping to reduce the pressures, hoping to prevent future attacks. And then we get to the third part of our work, which is really where the conference comes in, which is promotion. Can we have a conversation and help people to understand what it is that we're talking about? What are these values? Are they universal or not? And I think Ambassador Telle did a lovely job of taking us through the history, and I'm really pleased, and he is right, that so much of the modern vocabulary that we use and concepts that we use are rooted in the Enlightenment. But I'm equally delighted that he took it back even more to the House of Knowledge as a really good example that these are values that every society all around the world literally have attempted to wrestle with in one way or another, because at the essence what this is about is space to challenge, space to ask questions. And everywhere there is power, power resists the asking of the questions. And the question is, how can we build structures in society that allow that space so that we can allow humanity to move forward and knowledge to move forward and so forth. So this is just sort of an overview of us and how we got into this conference in Tunisia. The report, I think, does a really wonderful job of recreating the conversations that took place. I was rereading the report today, so I really urge all of you to go to the website and take a look at it. I think you'll get a real taste of what it was to be in conversation with people from all around the region, but especially in these two countries we're experiencing the most pressure, Tunisia and Egypt, but also Libya, where they were struggling, and Morocco and Algeria, and we brought scholars from Turkey and so forth. So I really urge you, because this moment of the Arab Spring is such an important moment where these societies are deciding what type of state will we have, what type of society will we have, what will be the boundary between being able to ask questions and push back. And so it really does a wonderful job. And I think overall the main message in the report is it answers the question in our title tonight of the Arab Spring, does academic freedom matter, with a resounding yes. That there needs to be this special space in society where we can have these conversations and not worry, and that we can bring to bear the skills and experience and knowledge of the higher education community, of experts, of scholars, to contribute to this development of society. So number one, we ended up with this resounding yes, and the participants uniformly emphasized the importance of the values in the university space. Not only academic freedom, but also institutional autonomy, that space that isn't interfered with by politics or religion or business and so forth. And social responsibility, that the university space should be engaged with society and help as these difficult debates are taking place. And we talked about governance and accountability and so forth, all of the wonderful and intertwined values of this space. The theme that we chose, university and the nation, it recognized, first and foremost, we said that great states, great nations need great universities. Think of any great state in the world. Think, and this I think was in the opening remarks by one of our keynote speakers, you cannot think of a state that is doing well, that it is doing prosperous, it is free, it is open, where people can think and they can pursue their passions and their talents, that does not have great universities that enjoy freedom and so forth. So the university has a central space, but in order to fulfill that function, the university needs security. The university needs autonomy. The university needs academic freedom. And so our conversation was, how do we create the conditions where the university can flourish, but not so that it's just selfish and doing it its own thing, but actually so it can be this engine of society and of prosperity. And so we looked at those sort of structural challenges, and then we concluded with sort of a set of recommendations in the report that, again, I urge you to look at them, and they've really been fueling my thinking ever since we were there. A particular emphasis of the role of the state. By definition, the state is the guarantor of security inside its space. Of course, we all recognize that the state is what provides security. But we have this unique tension in our space, because at the same time we depend on the state to have security, we also depend on the state to allow the autonomy of the institution. So there's a balance that has to happen there. And one of the challenges in Tunisia was, after the dictatorship was overthrown, what did they do? They pulled out all the secret security that had been at the university. So the universities were physically safe under the dictatorship. They were just also under surveillance. So they had zero autonomy, but they had security. And then they pulled out the security, so they ended up having zero security, but lots of autonomy. And so this was a bit of a challenge, and when the demonstrations came to Manouba, they were defenseless, and the state didn't provide the security that we needed to have that balance. So the role of the state is critical in our recommendations, and I'll come back to that in a second. The role of legal protection, of legitimizing the claim to academic freedom and to autonomy. And so they're currently engaged in the process of drafting their constitution and other founding legal instruments. And one of the things we did before the conference when we visited in June is we had done a study of all the world constitutions that protect academic freedom, and we went and we met with the National Constituent Assembly, to the committee that's drafting the rights provisions, and we said, here, look, don't take our word for it. These are the 20-something countries that already protect academic freedom, and these are the 90-something others that use other words that do similar things and so forth. So legal protection, and so we're working to encourage that not only in Tunisia but in other parts of the Arab Spring and other parts of the world. And I think finally the most important recommendation out of it, and really the most important conclusion from this conference, is that there is a strong desire for more discussion about these issues and more collaboration both within the region and internationally. Because these are very difficult concepts to find the right balance, and they're very fluid. The one clear, bright line is that this has to be a space that is free of intimidation. It has to be a space that is free of violence. But after that, we need to wrestle with each other about what are the lines and the balances and how do we deal with each challenge. So that was one of the very strong recommendations, this continuing this conversation. And I know for dialogues and I know for Scholars at Risk, we have every intention. We are doing that. Tonight is one step in that. So as follow-up, and I'll wrap up with here, the report, of course, will be widely disseminated. It is already available online. There will be print copies sent to the most key stakeholders to make sure they have it. We are exploring a release for the report in the region, at least in Tunis or elsewhere, so we can make sure that more attention comes to it. We are exploring a follow-up conference, probably in Egypt, given the sort of parallel developments there and how important Egypt is to the region as well. As a side project, as I said, this issue of state responsibility and state obligation to protect, Scholars at Risk is part of a global coalition of other groups like ours working to protect the space for education. And so we have recently concluded a project to issue a report on institutional autonomy and the protection of higher education from attack. So this report will be issued in the next couple of weeks. And Tunisia, it has 4 examples in it. Tunisia, the example of Dean Kazdaghli's university is in this as a real example of external pressure on the university. This report is building then to a meeting in Brussels in December, where we will be drafting a set of principles of state responsibility for protecting higher education. And so our goal is to get these principles adopted by states to recognize that they have an obligation, number one, to protect, but also to protect in a way that recognizes these values. So it's not enough to protect if you kill the values. They have to protect but respect the values. And so this meeting definitely grows out of that meeting. I was delighted to get an invitation from the Dean just today that there'll be a conference in January in Tunis organized by local advocates for the university values, that they're continuing the conversation, and I hope we can be a part of that. And Scholars at Risk, we have our network stretched out, as I said, over 35 countries, and every couple of years we bring the network together for a conference to continue these conversations. And that happens to be this coming year. So in April in Amsterdam, our network will meet, and I'm going to make sure that we have the story from Tunisia and from Egypt and from the Arab Spring countries represented. So we're connecting their experience with their wrestling with, but also with the experience of the rest of the world that's engaged in this work. So we have a number of really concrete opportunities for follow-up. Again, I can't emphasize enough to you, I really urge you to look at the report because it really gives you a taste of what it was to be in this space. There had been an assassination only weeks before the conference. So people really are feeling these issues in a very concrete and immediate way. So in conclusion, I'd say again, I think this is a discussion that has to happen now, not only in the Arab Spring, but everywhere, I think. But definitely amongst those who participated in this event and everyone that I've met in Tunisia and in Egypt and Turkey, there is a real hunger for having this conversation now. We invite all of you who are here to spread the word about the report and about this project, about our network. We invite you to get involved either as individuals or to help us get more universities involved in this work. And again, I just really want to thank all of you for making this a part of your week, for taking the time with us. And again, thank Mustapha and the ambassador, and especially Habib, for really standing up for these values when, frankly, most of us might think twice and keep quiet. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We now have time for question and answer, 45 minutes. More or less. So I invite you to participate as much as you can. Please limit your intervention to asking questions and not to making long comments, because we will not have chance for your colleagues to ask questions. And I will take each time 3 questions and ask the panelists to respond, and we take it from there. So the floor is yours.
Yes, please.
Sure. We've stayed focused and just across the Red Sea is NYU Abu Dhabi. I wondered if any of you have any comment on the questions of academic freedom there, or if you have any experience dealing with the setup or first few years of NYU Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
I'm wondering how the problems with academic freedom in the countries that you talked about have already affected the universities there.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to know about other models, either inside or outside the academic world, for possible institutional approaches to bolstering academic freedom, models within the Arab or North African model generally.
Or would you first maybe tackle the issue about NYU Abu Dhabi, or most knowledge?
So, prefacing comment that I don't have any direct contact with NYU Abu Dhabi. I haven't dealt with the administration.
That being said, everything I said, that there is one global higher education community, we believe that, and that is the message. So our network, we work with and on behalf of scholars in any part of the world. We will have different types of services depending on the type of threat or issue that comes up. So there are a number of issues raised by the baseline point. Really comes down to two elements. Through the binary lens of engage or don't engage. Whether it's China or Saudi Arabia or the Gulf or Russia, I think that's a false construct. We tend to, as a project, be very pro-engagement. By definition, we're building a global network, so it's pro-engagement. So I think the real question is engage with our values or engage without our values. Do we not mention our values when the conversation is uncomfortable? So we have a project that we've been sort of trying to do low level because it's an unfunded project, candidly, which is to encourage this concept of engaging with values. So when a partnership is undertaken, are there conversations about university values? And who's in those conversations? Are stakeholders from all levels of the institution allowed to be part of that conversation? Are there ways to get involved? Are the results of that conversation transparent? And are people able to access both sides of the conversation, if you will, and so forth? And I'm new to Twitter and these types of things, but one of the things I've been encouraged to get involved in, one of the things that we are trying to encourage is that there should be a public memorandum of understanding on the values of the university when partnerships like this are entered into. So I think if that goes far enough, I think we think it is a part of it. I think there are legitimate questions as to what is the boundary of those discussions. So in the case of NYU and other campuses being built abroad, I know that some have asked for engagement, for example, on the working conditions of workers. I think there's a legitimate question as to how far the circle goes, but I don't think there's any doubt that there should be a conversation about what are the values of the institution and how are we living those values in these partnerships.
I'd like to address one of the other questions. Would you please repeat your question?
Sure. I asked if there have been...
The first question I think we responded
Yes,
to.
thank you.
Yeah, but your colleague there, yes, right.
Yes, I'm wondering how what's been going on already in these countries has affected the universities as they are now.
Right. Maybe, yes.
أنا ذكرت أن ما كان يحدث في الجامعة كان له صدى على المرحلة التي تمر بها تونس، وهي مرحلة الانتقال من نظام استبدادي في المستوى السياسي إلى مرحلة أخرى. لكن لما كنا نعرف يعني كان التساؤل وكأن ما يحدث في الجامعة كان يعطينا صورة عن مستقبل تونس، يعني وكأن الهجوم الذي وقع كان وكأنه سبق للمستقبل.
We knew that there was a relationship between what was going on outside in the country and between what's going on inside the university, in the campus. However, later on we came to realize that this was a foreshadowing of events. What we have seen in the university was just some sort of a forecast for what's to be seen in Tunisia at large later on.
فكان ما يحدث في الجامعة يعني هو محل نقاش في المجتمع.
What's going on in the university was actually a hot topic discussed outside already.
والتعليق عليه يعني من الأطراف السياسية خارج الجامعة، يعني كان موضوع حديث للمجتمع.
It was a topic of discussion by all stakeholders in society. Comments were made by people outside the university, not only part of the university itself.
فأن التخلص من الاستبداد السياسي يعني أن الجامعة ستصبح رهينة لتدخل آخر.
So in a way, getting rid of political autocracy made the university the victim of oppression of another type.
ورأينا أن يعني أي مجتمع أو دولة تريد كما وقع الحديث فيه منذ حين أن كل معنى التقدم هو أن نترك للجامعة إمكانية يعني التطور بعيد عن الضغط مهما كان.
We already said that for progress to be achieved, the university must be given the space to progress and to prosper free from any kind of pressure.
وعلى الدولة أن تحمي هذا يعني هذا النموذج، يعني تحمي أن تكون الجامعة حرة.
And the state must actually protect this prototype, protect the freedom of the university, and protect the fact that the university should be free from any type of pressure.
لذلك كان الملتقى يعني حول أي مكان للجامعة في دولة متقدمة في أمة متقدمة كيف.
So we were talking about the role and the place of a university in an advanced nation, what it should be like.
فالخلاف مع ليس أن هذا الحزب الإسلامي نحن لا نناقش أنه نجح في الانتخابات، هو نجح في الانتخابات بصفة ديمقراطية.
The bone of contention is not whether this political party came to power after a successful election. This is a given. Yes, they came to power after winning the elections.
لكن في تقديرنا أنه يعني بقي يعني لم يحترم الجامعة.
In our view, though, this winning party did not respect the university.
لم يدعو إلى ضمان حرمتها.
And did not really protect the sanctity of this university.
وسمح ببقاء هذه المجموعات العنيفة في ورآها تهدد الأشخاص ولم يأتي لحمايتهم إلا بعد شهر.
And allowed the sit-in by violent groups and did not come to the rescue before a full month have passed.
كان يصرح زعيم هذا الحزب يقول إنهم ضمير الأمة.
The leader of this party used to say that those people who have chosen to sit in the university are the conscience of the nation.
كان يقول أنهم يذكرونه في شبابه.
He used to say they remind him of his youth, of himself.
By the way, he was also a terrorist. He was in fact in charge of the security of the Islamist party when the Islamist party was out of power and considered as a
ونفس المجموعات التي رأيناها في الكلية رأيناها في مجالات أخرى. هذه المجموعات التي هددت الكلية رأيناها نفس أشخاص رأينا تهاجم الصحفيين.
The same groups that threatened the university were threatening other groups, journalists,
وتهاجم الفنانين والمبدعين.
artists.
وفي شهر جوان 2012 لما كان روب أن كان هناك يعني عدنا من جديد إلى قانون إلى l'état d'urgence يعني
emergency law.
قانون الطوارئ.
طوارئ يعني
So in June 2012, when Mr. Quinn was there, emergency laws were reimposed, were reintroduced.
وفي شهر سبتمبر نفس المجموعات هاجمت سفارة الولايات المتحدة في تونس.
In September, the same groups attacked the U.S. Embassy in Tunis.
فاحترام الحريات الأكاديمية إذن له يعني من يتردد في هذه الحماية يعني يجعل المجتمع في خطر.
So when you're hesitant to protect academic freedoms, you are subjecting the society at large to dangers.
وتحولت إلى اغتيالات كما ذكر في هذه السنة. عشنا اغتيالين، الأول في شهر فبراير شكري بالعيد وزوجته كانت هنا معكم منذ مدة، والاغتيال الثاني السياسي في شهر جويليا الماضي.
So this has developed into full-fledged assassinations. Shukri Belaid was assassinated in February. His wife was with you a couple of weeks ago, and another assassination that we've witnessed in July.
وشمل أيضا الجيش في شهر جويليا 9 تم ذبحهم من الجيش التونسي.
Members of the Tunisian army were assassinated, were killed also.
والأمن
beheaded.
Their throats were
Their throats were slit.
وهذا ما الآن في تونس هناك أزمة سياسية نعيش منذ 4 أشهر. نبحث الآن أو الحل الذي نريده أن تكون هناك حكومة كفاءات وليس حكومة الإسلاميين، لأن لم يعد كل الناس أصبحوا متحيرين أن الانتخابات القادمة لن تنجح إذا واصلت هذه الحكومة في ترأس البلاد.
We're living a political crisis. And people feel that if the current government was to re-win elections, we're not going to get anywhere. We need a government of autocrats. We need a government of technocrats, sorry. Yes, that's the major slip of the tongue of an
كما ترين
interpreter.
هناك علاقة بين ما حدث في الجامعة وما هو موجود في المجتمع اليوم.
So in a way, what happened in the university and what's going on in the society at large is very, very closely related.
فكان مؤشر لما كان يعني هذا التساهل في التعامل مع الوضع في الجامعة عقد المسألة في مستوى البلد.
So leniency vis-a-vis what was going on in the university has complicated matters in the society at large and at the national level in general.
أرجو أن أكون قد أجبت.
I hope I have answered your questions.
Ambassador Telle, do you have anything to add on this?
It's very comprehensive.
I would say that what is happening at the university, in fact, is a metaphor for what is happening in the nation. In a sense that those who are behind these actions are doing the same thing in the larger picture of transforming a nation that was a secular nation into a religious background for implementation of all of their values, including control of the university, control of knowledge, of the educational system, etc. So in this way, the university was part of the turbulence that was going on in the nation. And we can say that it is a metaphor for this rejection of modernity that this party and its followers wanted to implement at the larger scale of the nation. And you might then compare to what happened in Egypt, and the same evolution happened there, except that at one point things came to a resolution because of the fact that you had the Egyptian army there, which made finally the difference. When things could no longer go the way they were going, there had to be a resolution. In Tunisia, there is no army to speak of. It is a professional army that is out of politics, and this is why you see now these efforts going on and on for dialogue and so on. And in fact, the last stage of this so-called dialogue that is going on, apparently to bring the secularists and the religious party together so as to figure out what should be the next step, has failed. And they declare today that there is no way to solve the problem. So we don't know what is going to happen. And you might see the effect of this, in fact, on the university at one point. So here we are. The university is really part of the nation. It is the nation. It is the metaphor for the problems that the nation is experiencing. Yes, please.
Bonsoir, monsieur. Merci beaucoup. Maybe for you, Mr. Quinn. I've been studying the role of social media in the Arab Spring, and I was wondering whether you are thinking or maybe even using social media right now to protect scholars.
حققنا الحرية. هناك حرية ولرجال الأعلام دور عظيم في هذا المستوى.
When we are asked usually what is it that we have achieved in Tunisia in the past 2 or 3 years, we say yes, we have achieved freedom, and journalists usually or people working in media have had a role to play in that.
يعني الحدث الكبير في تونس هو الحرية، يعني أن هناك مساحة كبيرة حققها رجال الأعلام، ولعل نعتبر أنهم إلى جانب التضامن الذي عرفناه يعني أحد يعني أقطاب هذا التضامن معنا في نشر الحقيقة في التعريف بها هم رجال قام به رجال الصحافة ورجال الأعلام.
The major event in Tunisia is actually freedom. There is a larger space now. It's a larger space of freedom achieved by the media. The freedom that has been achieved, I say, in addition to the solidarity that we felt among people, but it has been, I would believe that the media was a pillar in whatever has been achieved in Tunisia recently.
فلا يمكن الحديث عن حريات أكاديمية وحريات ديمقراطية بدون الحديث عن حرية الصحافة ودور العظيم لرجال الأعلام في تونس.
So in a way we cannot really speak about achievements without talking about the freedom of the press and the role that the press in general and journalism has played in Tunisia in this current situation.
والعديد منهم أيضا تعرضوا إلى المحاكمات وتعرضوا إلى المضايقات.
Many of the journalists were also brought to trial. They were harassed.
ويعني أعتقد أن معركة الجامعين هي نفسها معركة رجال الإعلام ورجال الصحافة.
We believe that the battle of academicians is the same battle as the journalists and the people of the press.
Yes, please, yes.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, because I think it's a really important one. Stepping back, before social media was just any electronic communication, I should emphasize, a network like ours would have been impossible without email, because it would have been cost prohibitive and we wouldn't be able to form these links across so many countries, but we can now. So I think we need, as advocates for this space, to see that as an opportunity to build the type of solidarity that would have been much more difficult to do a generation ago. Stepping into social media, I've already confessed that I am new to it, but I am now trying to embrace it. And I think it serves a couple of purposes for us. Number one is awareness, because so many of the pressures on this space happen in very small ways, where scholars and students feel isolated. So social media can be very important for that, and that's something we're exploring. For mobilization, of course. So when there is a threat, the faster we can bring more awareness to that situation, it literally raises the cost of doing the wrong conduct to the oppressor or to the aggressor. And I think that's one of our main concerns and strategies with Manouba, was just to make sure that they know that it's being watched, was very important. And then, frankly, framing the issues, because as I was trying to say before, once we get past the issue of physical safety, which is clear, there's no dispute, there's no confusion. Once you get past that, a lot of these issues are complicated. And so social media is helping us to frame the issues, combat misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation as to what academic freedom is or isn't, and to combat self-censorship and restraint on the part of academics and students who don't want to get engaged in these issues because they don't understand them. So I think social media is important now, and I think it will be much more important to us in this work as we move forward.
Any more questions, please? Je pense pas parce qu'on n'a pas la traduction. Well, if there are no more questions, I will then thank you very much for attending this event. I hope you will remain interested in these issues. And precisely speaking of the social media, I think today it is playing a tremendous role since the beginning of these events under the big headline of the Arab Spring. In fact, some have even constructed conspiracy theories that some sort of obscure powers behind the scene, you might call them whatever, the US or this or that, trained these social media activists and made them go into all of this in order to do harm to these countries and bring them under the oppression and the dominance of etc., etc. So you have all these things, and if, I should also mention that colleagues at NYU are trying scientifically, I mean through all sorts of measurement techniques, to assess the exact role that the social media played in the so-called Arab revolutions or Arab Spring. So we don't know yet. We have all sorts of assumptions about the role of the social media, all sorts of obscure and threatening theories. But in fact, to assess the real impact is still something that social scientists have to study carefully. What is clear today is, as Rob was saying, the social media is playing a tremendous role of mobilization. You can organize a demonstration in a matter of an hour, because you have on Twitter or Facebook an appeal by one camp or another to be present at that or that demonstration. This is certainly a role that is effective and that we observe, we can measure it. After the launching of an appeal, then 2 hours later you have a demonstration, and people wait for the message on Twitter or on Facebook, where to be, and so on. So this is one thing, mobilization. I think also you might say with certain measure of certainty that the social media is playing a tremendous role of awareness to call attention to whatever harm. And this is happening. For instance, in the case of Professor Kazdaghli, the social media at one point was really very, very crucial in making the case known, in calling the attention to various parts of the trials, and so on and so on. So I would also say this, and I think it will be the last point. I think governments today have not realized yet the importance of social media. It is one of the instruments of power that they cannot control. And this is the future. And I think the future for the youth of today, but the youth of tomorrow, and how then you can create a new understanding of freedoms, a new understanding of social organization. This we don't know yet, but it is certainly a future that we have to face, and that governments have to face. Look at what happened in the case of Snowden, in the case of all these documents, accusations about the National Security Agency. It has transformed the way governments look at each other. Suspicion now is part of the game. Tomorrow, we don't know what will happen. So that is my few things that I wanted to add to the reply regarding the social media. I finish here, and I would like to thank you again for coming to this event, and I hope, as Rob said before, you'll remain involved and follow the situation in these countries. They are essential to the United States, even if some do not understand how important that region is to the country. They are essential to our own understanding of universal values. Look at what is happening to Syria. We cannot simply close our eyes and say we are not concerned. They are essential to humanity because these countries are the are the lands where most of our values were born through the three Abrahamic religions. And therefore, we cannot simply ignore what is happening there. Thank you again very much, and I hope you will continue to come to these events. Thank you.